Now you've brought us to what was really the guts of the Frankfurt school itself as it started, when you started talking about the re-examination of Marxist concepts. As I said in my introduction to this program, it was the feeling that Marxism had to be re-examined and reconstructed that gave rise to your movement, particularly as a result of fascism. But fascism wasn't the only thing that precipitated it, was it? I mean, there were other political factors too. Can you comment on what some of them were?
You mean some of the factors which demanded a revaluation of Marxian categories?
Yes.
To me, one of the most important ones concerns the concept of socialism itself. In the development of Marxian theory, not in Marx himself, but in the development of his theory, socialism has become, the concept has almost entirely been focused on a more rational, larger development of the productive forces, on an ever higher productivity of labor, on a more rational distribution of the project, instead of stressing that a socialist society, as Marx envisaged it, at least the younger Marx envisaged it, was a society qualitatively different from all preceding societies. Now, in what way qualitatively different? The main point, I would say, is for Marx, a genuine socialist society was a society in which the quality of life was decidedly different from the existing societies. Meaning, in a genuine socialist society, labor, full-time alienated labor, would no longer be the measure of wealth and value. In an authentic socialist society, men and women could live their life without fear, without being compelled to spend their entirely adult existence in alienated performances. This image has been obscured, and the result was some kind of frightening continuity between the developed and advanced capitalist societies and the image of a socialist society.
Yes, socialism began to become like its enemy, so to speak.
Exactly.
I know from your writings that you had other very central criticisms of Marxist theory. Two that I would like to mention, partly because they're probably connected in your mind, is that you regarded Marxism as anti-libertarian, or at least insufficiently libertarian, as the Marxist tradition developed, and you also thought that it didn't take sufficient account of the individual. Now, it would be very interesting to hear you comment on those 2 points.
Marx did not concern himself very much with the individual, and he didn't have to, because at his time the very existence of the proletariat made this class a potentially revolutionary class. Now things have changed considerably since. You know, the question is to what extent can the present working class in the advanced industrial countries still be called a proletariat? The Western European countries have abandoned this concept altogether. Now, what has taken place is a large-scale integration of perhaps the majority of the population into the existing capitalist system. The organized working class, at least, no longer has nothing to lose but its chains, but a lot more. And this, in turn, it took place not only on a material but also on a psychological basis. The consciousness of the dependent population changed. It was one of the most striking phenomena to see to what extent the ruling power structure could manipulate, manage and control not only the consciousness but also the subconscious and unconscious of the individuals. Therefore, my friends at the Frankfurt School considered psychology one of the main branches of knowledge that had to be integrated with Marxian theory. By no means replacing Marxian theory, but taking it into Marxian theory.
You yourself have done a lot in your writings to try to marry Freudianism and Marxism, and I think that some people would say that this simply can't be done because the two patterns of explanation are incompatible with each other. I mean, to put it extremely briefly, Marxist theory locates the ultimate level of explanation of human affairs in technique. The theory, put very simply, is that the level of development of the means of production in a society at any given time determine the formation of classes in that society, and that in turn determines the relationships of individuals to each other, and on that basis grow up what Marxists call the superstructure of ideologies, religions, philosophy, art, and so on. Now, according to Freud, something entirely different is the ultimate explanation of human behavior. The ultimate explanation, according to him, lies in the repressed contents of the unconscious, our unconscious wishes, fantasies, fears, feelings, and so on, which are repressed as a result of distortions in our earliest relationships, above all with our parents. And he explains not only social behavior but also ideologies, art, religion, and so on, in terms of the externalization of the repressed contents of the psyche. Now, these are two entirely different kinds of explanation of the same set of phenomena. How can you possibly marry the two into a single theory?
I think they can easily be married, and it may well be a very happy marriage. I think there are two extremely different interpretations of two different levels of the same whole, the same totality. The primary drives, the unconscious primary drives, which Freud stipulated, namely erotic energy and destructive energy, eros and thanatos, develop within a specific given social framework, which in one way or the other regulates the manifestation of these primary drives. Now, the social impact goes even further than that. According to Freud, the more intense the repression in a society, the more what happened is a mobilization of surplus aggressiveness against this repression. Now, since, again according to Freud, repression is bound to increase with the progress of civilization, at the same time and parallel to it, aggressive energy, surplus aggressiveness, is going to be mobilized and is going to be released. In other words, with the progress of civilization, we will have a progress in destructiveness. And it seems to me no hypothesis can better explain what happens today than that one.
I think the following thought will occur to some people listening to our discussion up to this point. You have catalogued a very formidable list of defects in Marxist theory and prediction. The failure to predict the future success of capitalism, the anti-libertarian element in Marxism, the absence of any theory or attitude to the individual. You've also talked about other entirely new theories like Freudianism, which came on the scene after Marx and therefore couldn't have been accommodated by Marx in his outlook. A lot of people will say, well, since you were so conscious of this enormous range of defects in Marxism, why did you want to remain Marxists? I mean, why try to hang on to a discredited or falsified theory? Why not try to liberate your thought categories from that altogether and actually look at reality afresh?
Easy answer, because I do not believe that the theory as such has been falsified. What has happened is that some of the concepts of Marxian theory, as I said before, will have to be re-examined But this is not something from outside brought into Marxist theory. That is something Marxist theory itself, as a historical theory, demands. Now, it is relatively easy for me to enumerate, to give you a catalogue of the decisive concepts of Marx which have been corroborated in the development of capitalism. The concentration of economic power, the fusion of economic and political power, the increasing intervention of the state into the economy, the increasing difficulties in stemming the decline in the rate of profit, the need for engaging in a neo-imperialism in order to create markets and possibilities of enlarged accumulation of capital, and so on. I think this is a formidable catalogue, and it speaks a lot for Marxian theory.
Well, I don't want to get into a political argument. I'd love to do that, as
Why
a matter
not?
of fact. But, well, the purpose of this program is to elicit your views on a further range of topics. But I can't let what you've said just pass like that. I mean, to take only the first two of your list, you said that there's been increasing concentration of economic power, but surely through the invention of the joint stock company, the ownership of capital has been more widely dispersed than ever before. You talk about the convergence of economic and political power. I would say yes, but what has happened in the West, at least, is that the decisive control over the economy has passed into the hands of elected politicians, who in the democracies are directly elected by the mass of the people, and they take the basic economic decisions in the society.
Well, you know that with your first statement about the joint stock companies, you express one of the main concepts of Marxist revisionism, introduced first by Engels himself. They considered the joint stock companies with a dispersed ownership already as pre-forms of a socialist society. Now we know today that this is obviously wrong, and you will not maintain that, for example, in the great multinational corporations, the stockholders control the policy, national and global, of these corporations. It is not the ownership alone that matters, but the control of the productive forces, which is decisive. As far as the state is concerned and the role of the politicians, do you believe that the politicians make their decisions entirely by themselves as free individuals, or isn't there some kind of link between the policy makers and the great economic powers in the society?
Well, the politicians certainly aren't dominated by the great economic powers. But anyway, I think I will have to let that pass reluctantly and get back to the Frankfurt School.